Hi class, welcome to week 3 of ethics and law. Sorry, I have a little frog in my throat right now. So I've been looking over your week 2 discussion boards. Great job, great insight. And I just wanted to talk about Mark a little bit, the therapist from our vignette. And by no means do I excuse Mark's behavior because he did not handle his personal issues well and in relationships with his client. However, I just want us to be mindful and self-aware as much as we think we know how to handle situations or we trust ourselves. Like, we just never really know what life can throw at us at any given moment. If we look at our lives over the past 5 years, you would have probably never thought we would have experienced that 5 years before. And so I'm talking about, of course, the pandemic. We could have never predicted anything of that nature. And that altered a lot of our lives in a lot of different ways. For some of you, experienced a lot of grief and loss. For others of you, maybe it just felt inconvenience. Some of you may find it had felt financial hardship. For others of you, maybe it created depression, anxiety, all different kinds of things. It created a lot of that in our clients. It changed our whole mental health field because now telehealth is the way of the future and how majority of us do see clients. And so we can say like how we think we would handle situations or what we think we would do. But I just always want us to be mindful, like we're capable of being anybody. Anybody can be a Mark. And so just to be really on guard and really be in tune with the Lord and in tune with others that you know you well and that will speak truthfully to you, because, this is our job as well. And so maybe you're in a situation where you don't feel like you can stop working. And so as much as you would like to take time off for a family situation, how can you financially? And there's a lot of jobs that maybe your personal situation doesn't affect your professional world, but in our world it can. So it's altering the kinds of caseloads. I know during the time of the pandemic, I was doing remote learning with my children, and it was extremely painful for so many reasons. And I just couldn't see any kids. Like, I could not see kid clients. I felt like it was Groundhog's Day every day because I would do remote learning in the morning, and then I'd go see clients until the evening, and then I'd get up and do the same thing over again. And the days just were very long for a very long time. And so I just couldn't see any more other people's kids because I was kind of over my own. So, we can get in phases of life. Maybe you experience a loss, a pregnancy loss, infertility, grief of a loss of a parent, a divorce, a breakup. Maybe it's triggering situations. That doesn't mean necessarily all of them mean that we get out of seeing different types of people, like what I talked about last time. But it may be like, I'm not well emotionally and I cannot see someone going through the same situation because I will not be good for them. And so, having those honest conversations with people you hold dear, so you don't end up like Mark, is going to be really important for you. Whether that be a clinician, colleagues, both, people that really know you and that you allowed to be known. Some of you mentioned, well, this person just needs a therapist. And it's like, sure, I hope for Mark's sake, I talk about Mark like he's a real person, but I hope for Mark's sake that he has a real therapist. However, what you'll see when you start working, or even based on what you know with your own therapist, therapists only know what you tell them. And so if Mark wasn't going to be honest about what was really going on, and if Mark was delusional to how much his own personal life was affecting him, there's nothing anybody could say or do that would have changed that. And so even if they're in therapy, the therapist is only going to know and be able to work with what they know. So just all the things to be mindful of. I definitely agree it wasn't right how Mark was behaving. I definitely agree it's a problem and an ethical issue. I just don't want us to believe that we could never be Mark, because we all could be. So that's my little high horse for today. We're talking a bit about cultural competency today. So some buzzwords here: cultural diversity, competence. So it's our lack of awareness, of knowledge and interpersonal skills in regards to different cultures. And I will say, it's important as you enter this field to be mindful that we do not know everything, one, and that's okay. You're not expected to know everything. And two, it's okay to ask questions, and we don't want to make assumptions. You'd be better off asking a question than assuming you understand or know something about somebody and then really offending them. So I would suggest, if you're uncertain about someone's demographics, their ethnicity, their religion, anything, to ask the questions so that they can explain themselves to you, because everybody feels like their own experience is very personal to them. And maybe you might know what it's like because of something, but it might still be very different for them. So they need to be the storyteller. They need to tell you how it is. And so having that cultural empathy is going to also be important. And to make sure that our counseling is centered on multiculturalism, you know, if especially if that's really important to the client. You know, I know some clients, their cultural experience can be really important, and is the lens they view like everything. And so it's really important to talk with your clients about that. I've had clients who are from internationals, and so just their assimilation to America, how things are in Rwanda, how things are as they move into the U.S., maybe things that come in with that, not dealing with things necessarily from the past, all that kind of stuff is important to take into consideration and be mindful of, because I think those things matter as you're trying to treat people. Cultural tunnel vision is a perception of reality based on a very limited set of cultural experiences. So making sure that you expose yourself to, you know, different cultural experiences, be able to ask questions of clients to make sure that you're not just having tunnel vision and stuck on what your assumptions are. We don't have stereotypes and make judgments on people based on things that aren't real or true. You know, nowadays we have a lot of younger people, which this is great. Some of you might have been part of some of these movements, but are about social justice that go beyond cultural awareness, justice for undeserved people groups, for people in different situations where they're not equitable, justice for undeserved or oppressed people. We talk about sex trafficking a lot, maybe how people are treated in trafficking in regards to labor. And so there's been a lot of social justice awareness, I would say, over the last like 15 years or so. And so, you know, you might have clients that are very passionate about that. You yourself might be very passionate about that, but it's this whole like concept of wanting to be aware of other people. And I really see it as like, none of us are better than anybody else. And none of us are more deserving than anybody else for basic things. And so just being mindful of how passionate your clients can be about some of those things. Now, you might have some clients that are totally opposite of this, that are very critical, very judgmental, very lack empathy towards other cultures or nationalities. And that might be very triggering for you. And you might have to talk to your supervisor about that and figure out how to work through that. You get all wide varieties of people that come into your office. So just be prepared for that too, as much as we want to be prepared for people who might be different than us, and having to understand we might have people that are different from us in other ways that can be very frustrating or very upsetting or appalling. But that doesn't mean we can't treat them either. And so, yeah, just being mindful of that. So we are expected to be responsible to recognize the needs of a diverse client population. And integrating culturally responsive practices. The more traditional models of therapy is of a major importance when we consider the diverse client population and the very diverse overall set of people that we serve. So just making sure that we're treating people in a responsible and ethical way is important. Okay. So just, again, good things to think about. I'm going to move right along here to chapter 5, where we're talking about clients' rights and counselor responsibility. So a client has the right to hopefully a very competent therapist. That should be an expectation. We may not all feel super competent, but we need to be ready to, and these are some of the ethics codes. American Counseling Association talks about counselors explicitly address with clients the nature of all services provided. So we're going to talk about that. Your kind of your limits of confidentiality, all that kind of stuff. So we want to give informed consent because we want to make sure all of our clients are, one, knowing what they're getting themselves into, and two, that they're consenting to treatment. They need to know the limits of confidentiality. They need to know the expectations of therapy, the cost, the duration, some boundaries. This is all the paperwork and whatnot that goes out to clients before your first session and needs to be signed before you start session. So wherever you end up working, they will have some level of informed consent, probably a HIPAA form, which is again about protecting medical records. They might have private or practice policies kind of document that talks about like your agency. So there's a lot of paperwork. And so what I've come to realize with this whole technological world, like even my group practice, we send out all of their documents virtually in a portal, and sometimes our clients aren't filling it out because we're not handing it to them. And we start sessions without consent. So that's a problem. So it's even in a virtual world, we need to make sure people are following through and like signing away at what they need to in order for there to be therapy. Otherwise, there could be major risks involved as far as legalities, ethical issues. We're going to talk about limits of confidentiality in the first few moments of counseling. So, you know, when I meet a first-time client, I'm usually saying something like, "Hi, my name is Tony. How old are ye? I'm a licensed MFT, marriage and family therapist. If you are harm to yourself, others, elder abuse, or child abuse, I have to report. Otherwise, everything stays within the confines of this room." Something of that nature is what I say usually. So you want to make sure that your clients know the information that is needed up front. Otherwise, there could be problems. So you want to make sure your client understands. Is it under influence? Is mentally able to understand? And if they're not, that they have a parent involved to help with that, or a guardian. Making sure if they have questions that we're answering questions. These are talking about some of the goals that you're hoping to talk about in informed consent. So we want them to be aware of what they're getting themselves into. Now, anytime you go through informed consent and go over limits of liability, limits of confidentiality, you can mention it again if someone seems like they're going to drop a bomb on you, and you want to say, you know, just want to remind you, these are the standards I'm held to, because remember, it's your license on your line. It's all your hard work on the line. You could say it again as a way to remind people, and they still may want to tell you, but you're just, again, gently reminding them, like, I can't just keep everything a secret, right? And it's important to be very true to yourself on that, because you can get yourself in a real big situation. It's not our job to be judge and jury. It is our job to do our due diligence and report. And if we don't and something happens, it can be majorly problematic. And everyone interprets what we think as abuse very differently. And that's why the people in the Department of Child Protective Services are the ones in charge of determining what's abuse and what's not. And if they make a mistake, it's on them, not on you. So, you know, we just have to report the information. It's their job to follow through and do something about it. Okay. So please make sure that when you go over informed consent with your clients, you know the paperwork, you read it, you understand it, so you know how to explain it. and that you're doing it the first time you're meeting them so that they're aware. Even though they filled out the paperwork online, you still go over it. Say, hey, you filled out some informed consent. This is what it is. Things of that nature, because I've said, it's very, very, very important. Okay. So all these things are very important as you begin this journey. You know, you're not expected to have a lot of in-depth details of that the clients would have about you. However, if you are obviously a trainee or an associate, you need to disclose that information so clients are aware of where you're at in your schooling. You would add in there that you're under the supervision of somebody. And I would make that clear when I did my limits of confidentiality as an associate or trainee. I would say, hi, my name is Toni Howard-Rickey. I am an associate marriage and family therapist. Back in the day, it was intern. What that means is I'm still working towards my hours of licensure, and I'm under the supervision of the CBU Counseling Center. However, nothing goes beyond those walls unless it's a limit of a confidentiality issue. So you want to make sure clients know where you're at in your own experience, not to devalue your ability to help them, but they should know what they're, you know, when you go see a doctor and you're seeing an intern or somebody who's still in school, they make sure to let you know, because that's important for the client's decision-making ability. Okay. Well, I hope you guys have a great week. I look forward to reading more of your discussion boards.